Welcome to Predictable with Stu. This is, of course, the program that you always turn to for all the latest election information. And it's a big day for that. It is election night, at least in some states. We have upcoming primary elections tonight, May 19th in Alabama. There's runoff if they don't get to 50%. Same thing in Georgia. Then we have Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. A lot of different races to talk about and, different ways to talk about them. What's going to happen in the race, what you can do on prediction markets to sort of suss out the information as to who's going to win. And, of course, in addition to that, hopefully win yourself, right? Politicians have been making money off of you for a very long time. It's time that you turn the tables a little bit and make some money off of them. That's the way we look at things here at Predictable with Stu. By the way, go to predictableshow.com. I want to set you up there first because one of the big things we're going to be doing tonight is a live stream talking about the results as they come in and looking for opportunities in that moment. This isn't something where, you sign up, you put your position in on a particular candidate, you wait 6 months and just hope it all works out. Sometimes you find opportunities while you're looking at the data come in. This happened last time we did a live stream, actually, in real time. We were in the middle of looking at results and realized a candidate that was a massive favorite looked a little shaky. And we looked at the data and we kind of went through on the live stream. Hey, wait a minute. Where are these votes coming in from? Where do they need to come in from for this particular candidate to win? And that's when we hit Meyer Mania. Yeah, Meyer Mania, who was the Democratic candidate. I don't even remember where it was, honestly. Democratic candidate who wound up, it was only a 5% chance, I think, to win leading into the night. Wound up winning, and we were able to hop on for a small part of that particular ride to 100%. That's fun to do. We'll do that tonight, hopefully, and get some good opportunities, and we'll talk about all the big races as well. I want to go through some of them here. I don't have a position on all of these, frankly. Some of them I have a little inkling. I might be dabbling a little bit here and there on some of these races. And we also have some other big races that I'm in on as well. We'll talk about those on today's program. Kind of an election-focused episode here. Given that it's election day, seems appropriate. Let me start with one of the big races in Georgia gubernatorial primary on the Republican side. Again, this is a runoff on this one. So if no one gets to 50%, it will be a runoff on June 16th. The candidates, Burt Jones, Rick Jackson, Chris Carr, and Brad Raffensperger. You remember Brad Raffensperger having a prominent role during the 2020 election debacle in Georgia. He was a big spokesperson for saying, actually, this election was not stolen there. And that's not always the best position to take for your political future in a red state and in a Republican primary. Trump has endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones in this case. You also have Rick Jackson, who's like a self-funding billionaire type of guy. Here's where the latest polling is. Real Clear Politics has an average for you. Jackson at 28.2, Jones 25.2, Raffensperger back at 13.8, and Carr at 6. And if you look at this race, I think one interesting thing to look at, we often talk about this, which is try to find the candidate that you don't think will win, right? It's easier to pick out what is not going to happen rather than what is going to happen. I don't think Brad Raffensperger has much of a chance in this particular race, despite being in the low double digits. However, the markets really don't give you too much room here to profit. He's at 0.9%. Here's the Kalshi graph right now. Gubernatorial primary, 0.9% for Brad Raffensperger. Rick Jackson's at 39% and Burt Jones at 62%. Again, you look at that one, and one of the big pieces of evidence, and there are some exceptions to this, but very few, when Donald Trump does come into a Republican primary environment and make an endorsement, usually that candidate's going to be moved enough to win the primary. Now, Burt Jones is a guy who he's only up by he's actually down by a couple of points in the polling. Prediction markets don't really buy it, though. You see a pretty steady lead for Jackson, Brad Jones in second. So Burt Jones, I'm going to say Brad Jones every single time because I knew a guy, Brad Jones. Anyway, Burt Jones, 62%, Rick Jackson at 39%. So there you go. It's interesting. The polling leading up to one thing. Prediction markets kind of saying the opposite. Burt Jones with the lead there on prediction markets. That's one that I'm interested in, honestly, tonight. I'm going to go in. I'm going to dive in a little bit more as we go in, maybe as we see the first data come in and see if there's anything we can suss out of that. But Burt Jones is an interesting prospect there because we're talking about a red state, we're talking about a Trump endorsement, and we're talking about a situation where it does seem that the secondary players are not going to come to the top. The Georgia Senate also has a big primary going on tonight. That primary is between Mike Collins, Derek Dooley, Buddy Carter. Mike Collins is he's aligned with a lot. He seems to have a lead, at least in the polling. He's at 29.5%. Dooley's at 18%. But we have seen closer polling late in this race. One poll from the other day, Insider Advantage had it at 32.26, so kind of close. And it does seem that Dooley is, moving forward. He's kind of associated with a pretty powerful get out the vote effort. Likely we'll see a runoff here. Again, this is something that you have to. This is, by the way, the Kalshi graph. Just to give this to you here quickly, Mike Collins 66% chance to win, Derek Dooley at 34%, Buddy Carter at 1%. One of the reasons why, again, you have to follow the rules on Kalshi or Polymarket or wherever, predict it wherever you happen to be. Make sure you understand the rules of what you're investing in. But secondarily, one of the things when you're thinking about this is to understand the rules of the election. And throwing a little bit of a wrench into this are all these runoffs. It's not all that fun to constantly get into these things where you're going to get into a market and then you're going to have to wait months for it to actually play out. In this case, really weeks. I mean, it's what is it, June 16th? Is that what I said earlier? June. I know it's in June. Let's see. Yeah, June 16th is that runoff. So that you think about that runoff, you have to wait for the final results. The no's you don't have to wait for. So if you get in there, let's say Buddy Carter, Brad Raffensperger, you say, okay, these guys aren't going to get in. You might be able to at least grab a percent tonight or two. Not all that exciting, but it is there, and that one will resolve likely tonight unless there's a huge surprise. Go to some of the congressional races here in Georgia. We won't spend too much time on this. Andrew Clyde is the incumbent in the Georgia 9th District primary. You've got Sam Coulvillon and Greg Poole. Doesn't look like there's all that much chance, at least according to the prediction markets, of anything surprising happening here. Although Andrew Clyde is at 88%. If you can get that at 88%, it's kind of interesting. You see over the past couple of, a few hours before we pulled these graphs, you see a little bit of a rise, or a little bit of falling off for Andrew Clyde. Is that something that's foretelling the future? I honestly don't know. I don't know where that's coming from. A lot of times these races, particularly races that revolve around an individual district, a primary, you're not going to see only $34,000 are in that market right now. So there's not a massive amount of money in the market for where, necessarily these things couldn't be moved pretty easily. Someone comes in with a few $100 and an opinion, they can move that thing. And that is why sometimes you see these sort of late bumps. Georgia 10 is another district we're following. Houston Gaines, Ryan Millsap going at it. Gaines is state representative. He's the favorite here. Looking, again, you see a little bit of a drop-off toward the top here. Right now he's at 88%. All these are kind of interesting. If it's one thing to grab one of these candidates who's a huge favorite at 96%, right? Getting 4% in a night, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, be sure, we told you about Meyer Mania earlier. There are times where these things aren't right. And if you don't know anything about the race, you're just saying, I'm going to pick everything in the 90s, you might get burned. If you can get a huge favorite, though, and really get something at 88%, we'll see if these things hold up. My guess is by the time I'm talking about this, by the time you hear this, it might not be at 88% anymore because people are going to see those opportunities and potentially snag them up. So those are the first four. Those are all in Georgia. And again, those are all susceptible to the runoff. There probably will be at least one, maybe two runoffs in that pack. Another thing that we've been talking about is this idea of a Trump endorsement and the big factor that becomes in a Republican primary. When you're looking for opportunities in these markets, it's really important to know, especially with someone as influential as Trump. There's really not an equivalent on the Democratic side. I'll give you an example of potentially an interesting example of this, but it's not nearly as black and white as when Trump gets involved in these things. And Trump has had, by the way, in the past, candidates he's endorsed that have lost. Georgia is one of the places where that has happened routinely. I mean, if you go back to 2020, Kemp, he hated Kemp, and Kemp wound up getting through there. He wound up going after other candidates, trying to get to unseat Kemp. It was at Purdue, I believe, was his guy. That didn't work out very well. And even though Trump had his full passion behind that, Georgia has very continuously going back to Kemp and his favorites, and we might be able to learn something here in some of these races. There's also a difference between a Trump endorsement and a Trump revenge plot. And I think it's pretty significant, honestly. Trump has endorsed people and has had losses with those endorsements, particularly earlier on in his run. When it's a revenge tour, you've got that Purdue Kemp story I just talked about. There's a couple of others, but there's not a ton in primaries. When he really is dedicated to take somebody out, he's usually able to do it. Now, we talked about Thomas Massie. We're going to come back to Massie. We talked about him yesterday. We're going to come back to him here in a little bit. Trump tried to take him out in 2018 as well. Then I think wound up endorsing him again in 2022. Now he's back off of him. It's a 4-year cycle, apparently, with Thomas. He likes him and he doesn't. But he's now really dedicated to take out Thomas Massie. He's throwing a ton of resources. He's getting a lot of his associated groups to put a ton of resources in taking Thomas Massie out. The reason I bring that up is to bring you to Alabama. There's a Senate GOP race there, which I think is really interesting and goes a little bit against type in the races we've talked about so far. Let me show you the recent polling. It's relatively interesting. If you go back to February, you saw Marshall leading the polls there. The three candidates basically that have a chance here, Marshall, Moore, and Hudson. Marshall has faded considerably. He has been in the mid-teens now for a few weeks. It's uncertain whether he's going to bounce back from that. But this is a three-way race. Marshall, I think, is the least likely to win. The other two candidates are Moore, who is Barry Moore, who is a Trump-endorsed candidate. Moore is the guy that Trump has picked. Moore is the guy Trump has been pushing for. The wild card here, and you see Steve Marshall, let me show you the Kalshi graph here. Steve Marshall is way down at 3%. The recent polling has, you see a pretty close race between Moore and Hudson, depending on the poll, with Marshall fading. The reason I bring this up as a maybe against type opportunity is this guy, Jared Hudson, who is a military veteran. For whatever reason, he has had a considerable rise recently. In fact, the most recent poll, he was actually leading over Moore. It's one poll. I will say, Qantas was the best pollster in the Louisiana race that we talked about from this past Saturday. Doesn't mean that they nail every poll, but they did do a good job there. They have Hudson ahead by 9 points over Moore. Those are the two, I think, that are going to lead here. Again, this is, let me check the date one more time. The 16th is the runoff. I think there's a very good chance, again, of a runoff here. So I don't necessarily love that from an investment perspective. It means you're waiting a few weeks. It might be better to wait and see what happens here and come back into this market later. Hudson, by the way, interesting part of this, he's loved by the ladies. Apparently a very good-looking man. Now, of course, I maybe not as good as a sexy man like myself, of course, but this guy is like a major. He was like a big special forces guy. The ladies love the guy. Okay, I don't know anything about that. I've been to the gym like 3 times in my life, but apparently the ladies love him, and that is partially, supposedly, the reason why he is more competitive than you might think he would be in this particular situation. Is that enough? I don't know. But a TV-friendly guy, a lot of times, can be helpful in that situation. What I would say to this race is, remember the rules. The runoff is not going to be for a few weeks. The likely outcome here is that there's not going to be a final score here tonight. What the outlier possibility here, it's a way to pick up a few percent if you want to, is to go against Steve Marshall. The outlier possibility is he squeaks into that runoff. My guess is that doesn't happen, but that is a possibility, and why there's a 3% pickup possibility for you if you happen to go no on Marshall tonight. Again, small potatoes, but we like stacking the small potatoes sometimes on the show. Sometimes you just want to get a few gains here and there to grow the little. We're building towards this midterm election. You build the pocketbook, you build the bankroll as we lead up to the big stuff that's going to happen in the midterms. I want you to have money left in your account when we get there. So you don't have to take huge risks here. We just want to gain, stack some gains, move it forward, because when we're going to the easiest way to make money off of these elections is what we'll do as we get close to the midterms is we will take hundreds of elections. Okay, and we will model them all out, and we will pick the best opportunities out of those markets. Here, what we're doing is we're picking from a narrow slate. Okay, there are some interesting races here. There's none that I'm absolutely in love with, though. And I want to be in love with a pick when I make it. We will see a lot of picks that I'm in love with as we get towards the election. Right now, primary polling is notoriously more difficult. You just don't know in some of these situations what's actually going to happen. So I want you to hold back. I don't want you to go crazy. I don't want you dumping your entire bankroll into each one of these. I'm not a financial advice show, but for whatever opinion, whatever percentage of you respects my advice here, which, it's up to you. I just think you want to be careful on these unless you have a really strong take, maybe that's stronger than mine. Let me give you a few others before we go. We're going to talk a couple bigger races here coming up as well with Dan Andros in a moment. Pennsylvania 3 is one you probably are not paying attention to, the Democratic primary in particular. This is one of the most Democratic districts in America. Okay, this is super blue, bright blue district. They've got an interesting race here going on between Chris Rabb and Sharif Street. It's sort of an establishment versus progressive fight, almost like a squad versus Pelosi type of situation, right? Where you have an establishment type candidate, that's Sharif Street, and Chris Rabb being the progressive candidate in that race. Now, when I talk to you about polling, a lot of times being limited in these races, let me show you an example of this. This right now, the most recent polling, this is, I think, from the New York Times, has a third candidate, Stanford, at 28%, Rabb, the progressive, at 23%. What's interesting about that is it was from April 1st and 2nd. So we are now talking about polls that are 6 and 7 weeks outdated. There's just not much you can glean from that. And then I'll show you what that looks like when we talk about the prediction market itself. Pennsylvania 03 has Chris Rabb as a 64% favorite, Sharif Street at 33%, and Stanford, the one leading that most recent poll, at 1.8%. Now, a lot of times this has to do with money flowing into the district. A lot of the people involved in these races who are watching them very, very closely are able to suss out a little bit more than you can from a 7-week-old poll. It does appear that Stanford is not going to win this race. But, again, this would make me a little nervous. If I was going to go no on Stanford at 1.8%, just to try to bank some small gains, I'd be a little nervous that she could make a run here. I might look for early returns to see if she gets a bump and gets a little bit higher, and then go no. That's potentially an approach that you can take. Anyway, that one honestly not been a focus of mine, but I did want to bring that one up. That was one of the reasons I wanted to talk about that one was the whole endorsement situation. The squad is essentially out in favoring of Rabb. This is a very blue district. You'd think it would play there, right? And I think that's why Rabb is going to be the favorite there. But I mean, I have to be honest with you, other than maybe a little bit of a fly or a few shares, I wouldn't go crazy on that one myself. Pennsylvania 7th, another one, Bob Brooks, Lamont McClure, which is a great name, by the way. Lamont McClure. That's a great name. That sounds like a character Phil Hartman would be playing on The Simpsons. Ryan Croswell and Carol Obondo Durstein, DCCC-backed firefighter Bob Brooks is the favorite here. And that's what Republicans were kind of trying to get in on this one. They were like propping up other candidates they wanted to actually win. They wanted the weaker candidate to get through, which I think was McClure in that particular race. Lamont McClure, great name. Unfortunately for the Republicans, it doesn't seem like that's going to win. Again, McClure is competitive here. The latest poll has, and this is again weeks old, Brooks at 24, McClure at 17. Still 36% undecided there, but the money has really been flowing in. With the exception of this sort of Republican-aligned or rumored to be aligned super PAC, most of the money coming in for Brooks. Here's the Kalshi graph for this particular one. Brooks, big favorite, 95.5%. McClure, who is finishing second in these polls, only at 1.7% chance, and Ryan Croswell, another candidate, at 8.3%. Let me end on Kentucky because I want to go to Kentucky next and go back to Thomas Massie for a second. We have Zach Dembo, Sherilyn Stevenson. This is, again, Zach Dembo seems to be the favorite. This was not the case just a few weeks ago, early April. Stevenson had a 14-point lead in the really the only poll that I found, honestly. That it's just sparse. I don't like guessing. I'd rather know. And a lot of these races, you're kind of in that area where there's more guessing going on leading in. A lot of times when you start watching those returns come in, you can start making projections on those returns and say, wait a minute, I think there is a favorite here, and this is who I think it is. That was how Meyer Mania went last time. Join us tonight on the live stream. I hope we find another one of those opportunities because I know there were people I talked to in the audience that made hundreds and hundreds of dollars off of that particular moment in the live stream. I would love those things to happen to you. Hopefully they do tonight. And me, too, by the way, because I was, grabbing a bunch of those shares myself. Kentucky 06. Right now, it seems like Dembo has become the favorite here. It's a 75% chance, 20% chance for Stevenson. Again, only about $30,000 in this particular market. So are there opportunities here? Probably. Are there massive feelings that I have on these races? I will say I don't have a great pick here for you where I'm going to be like, oh, you got to throw your money into this situation. I think there's risky possibilities here, but I do think it's interesting to maybe dabble. This is a great time to learn. If you are new to prediction markets and you're thinking, hey, I want to go big or bigger when we get to November, this is a great time to just learn. Go in there, buy a few shares of a couple of candidates that you think have a chance, watch it play out, watch the live stream, feel how that race kind of develops, and then follow along with your accounts. Win or lose, keep the odds and the percentages and the amounts small so they don't really care whether you're winning or losing per se, and get yourself familiar with these things. You've got time. You've got plenty of time to ramp up for this. You don't need to be involved in every one of these markets. But there is time and there's tons of opportunity right around the corner in November. Go to predictableshow.com. predictableshow.com and the YouTube page, youtube.com/@predictableshow, those two places. We're going to be doing streams, we're going to be doing shows, all the stuff is going to be in those two places. And I want to make sure you're prepared as we go into the bigger season because we're going to build towards this. We don't need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to be tripling, quadrupling your money tonight. Although if you do, I would love to hear about it. But on the other hand, we do have these massive opportunities coming up in the coming months, and I want to make sure you're prepared to cash in on them because there are real profit opportunities right around the corner. I want to take a break, come back on the other side, and I want to talk Thomas Massie next. Welcome back to Predictable with Stu. Go to predictableshow.com. Live stream for the election coming up tonight as the election results come in. We may even hop on and off a couple of times. Maybe we'll do some on YouTube. Maybe we'll do some on Substack. Just join us. We'd appreciate it. Thomas Massie tweeted this earlier today. I did not see this coming, but my election has become an inflection point for our whole country. Today, we make history. Will you be part of this historic day by voting, calling friends who vote, posting on social media, or making a donation? Spread the word, fellow patriots. Now, we are talking about the most expensive House primary in modern history, actually probably of all time, because I doubt like the 1600s there was one that cost more. But Republicans fight to survive Trump's wrath in most expensive House primary ever. Over $32 million spent that we know of so far. A lot of outside money coming in really for both candidates. Thomas Massie taking in a lot more money on smaller donations. A lot of the big money donations coming in for Ed Gallrein, his opponent. Those are the two that are going here. The polling is sort of all over the map. Lots of ties, lots of Massie leading. But when you look, Qantas had it as Gallrein leading, and SoCal and Gray House, the last two polls out, both have Gallrein leading. A couple of ties. These are the big data poll seems to be the most positive for Thomas Massie, depending on how you feel about that pollster. That could be significant. And then you go back earlier in April and you see it kind of the dynamic has changed. So one of the things you notice about these elections. And one of the reasons it's not just okay to tune into Predictable with Stu on like election day, especially as we get towards November, it's good to get ahead of it. Like it'll be good. The best positions I always find are like a month out. right? Before that last election moves, before it gets too sure, the market gets too sharp on these elections, and we'll look for those opportunities with you. This is what the Kalshi graph looks like today. Ed Gallrein has now moved into the lead, 61% chance of winning this election, 40% chance for Thomas Massie, and then a third candidate is there as well. I want to bring in Dan Andros. He is, of course, with us now, a friend of the program. Dan, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Stu, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this Massie race because it's one of those that you get a lot of pushback when you talk about it, no matter which side you go. There's a lot of people, of course, big Trump defenders and are upset if you say anything positive about Thomas Massie. Again, I like Massie, generally speaking. I'm honest about my general affinity for the guy. I don't agree with him on every position, but I like him. I like those contrarians. I like people who kind of stick by their positions, even if other politicians are kind of bossing them around and telling them not to. I think we need more of that in Washington, frankly. But that is a situation where, the supporters of the president will get mad if you say good things about Massie. People, when you say good things about Gallrein or bad things about Massie, people get angry. This is an interesting race. Tons of money being spent here. What are your general impressions of this thing?
Well, I think it's really coming down to two things. This is a race, really, we're going to see which one is stronger, whether it's the emotional sort of attachment that people have to President Trump. And we've seen that over the years. There is a loyalty to President Trump that a lot of his followers have, where any criticism that comes in, they almost take it as, even if you're somebody who doesn't criticize President Trump a lot, and you might throw I don't like this thing here, they treat it as if it's the same as MSNBC or CNN criticizing him, right? Mm-hmm. It lands the same to them. And they're like, oh, not you too, like that. Yeah. It's that sort of vibe. And I think that's one side of things, with Massie, because even though he votes with Republicans, with Trump most of the time, he's opposed him several times and publicly. And that's really frustrated Trump at times. And so there's that contingent of the loyalty and the emotion and that sort of support with Trump. And then you have the ideological side of things, more what you're talking about, Stu, where people appreciate someone who has a set of core kind of beliefs and sticks to those, whether or not it's popular, right? So those are two very real types of views that people on the right now are wrestling with. There's the look at what, Trump's our guy. Why are you stopping our guy? And then there's, we need principles. We need to be operating on principles so that we're not all over the board on things. So I think that's a real fight within the Republican Party right now. And I think that's part of the reason why this particular race has so much attention, because it might answer some question as to where we're at, who's winning the ideological battle and who's winning sort of the loyalty battle.
Right. No, it's true. I think of my son, Zach, whose favorite food is hibachi. My son, there's one particular hibachi place the boy loves. And whenever there's an opportunity, there will be like a 3 or 4 week buildup to a trip to this hibachi because he loves it so much. And also it just completely destroys you, right? Like it's like multiple hours you're there. You come back more full than Thanksgiving. You can't eat for like a week afterward. It's just the way it is. But he loves this hibachi place. And Zach is pretty easy. He'll come or he'll do what you need to do. He'll, like, when plans get changed, he's pretty malleable with what's going on. But you can't pull the rug out when it comes to that hibachi place. And that's kind of how I see this right now with the Massie situation. This Massie being out of Congress is Trump's hibachi. He really, really wants it. This isn't like his endorsement in Alabama where he's like, this guy would be good. I think I like him. He says my full and complete endorsement a lot, but he means it here. He wants Thomas Massie out. He sees them as the most annoying guy in the world because he sees him as always opposing him. I mean, honestly, I think Massie votes with him something like 90% of the time, which is not irregular for a Republican. That being said, I just think that, like, when voters have an opportunity, are they really going to take the hibachi meal out from in front of Zach? I've seen it happen, and you don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at the Kalshi switch, which you just had up there, and yours was the really zoomed in one, I think, to a day, and
Yeah.
it did the X, right? It was going along, and then whoop, they just flip lines, and then I mean, when you look at those polls, then you think, well, the polls don't look terrible, but remember, Massey's a guy who he doesn't live in the 80 to 90% safety range. I think he lives more in like the 60 to 75% safety range, which is more doable to take down if, you're trying to pull a hibachi here, right? You're not pulling I mean, even with Trump's power, you're probably not getting that 90% safety person, right? Like you're not, I mean, unless something really dramatic happened but then they wouldn't be 90% safe anyway.
Right.
With that. So he probably sees Massie as, okay, a guy that's a thorn in my side. That's how he views it. And this one's doable.
Can you bring those polls one more time? I want to hit one more thing on this poll. By the way, it's the yum yum sauce that he really likes, Zach. The hibachi he likes.
It's not the onion rings trains that they make, little steam trains.
By the way, that's a great moment in every hibachi. But the food is great. It comes off the grill hot, Dan, and that's a big thing. You're getting it right off that grill. It's super, super hot, super, super fresh. But I will say for Zach, I think the whole thing is the yum yum sauce. You can get that grill experience anywhere. He loves that yum yum sauce. Okay, here's the polling from Thomas. This is already a very stupid show. Thomas Massie. I just want you to look at these polls for a second. This is real clear politics. This is their average at their most recent polling. And you might say, okay, well, I see some with Gallrein up top, some with Massie up top, some ties. I might look at that and just kind of summarize in my head that's a 50-50 race. Let me just point a word of caution on these polls. If you go back through all of them, the best polling results by far are from Big Data, which is a firm that has some contrarian results at times. It is more positive for Massie than the other pollsters. And when you take a quick glimpse at this, you might not notice this, but 4 of these polls are from Big Data. One has a tie, another has a tie, one has Massie +2, another has Massie +4. Even in the Big Data polls, you see movement toward Gallrein as we get closer. So even in the most positive Massie polls, it's gone from a Massie +4 to even. Then you look at every other poll on here, with the exception of one from early April, which had Massie ahead. Gallrein is leading in all of them. Qantas, Gallrein +8. SoCal, Gallrein +7. Greyhouse, Gallrein +7. If you are the type of person who really believes in that Big Data poll, you might be looking at a 50-50 race. I tend to look at all of this and everything that's happening. There's a bunch of different factors, and we discussed them at length yesterday, so I don't want to go back and rehash the entire thing. But I do think we're at a place, at least in my head, Dan, where I think Thomas Massie is the underdog here significantly. I think there might be still some value. Even, where is it now? 60
to 41.
Yeah, I mean, we're running out of value. This has increased, as you point out, Dan, $8 million in this market, by the way. We were giving you other races where there was crazy. 30,000 on these. But I mean, when that thing crossed, there was a lot of value. We're now up at 60. I think maybe this is a 75% chance that Gallrein wins, in my mind, which shows you 15 points of value. That's not nothing, but it isn't a massive gap anymore. When we first started getting into this, there was a much larger gap. So that's where we are right now on that. I want to hit one other race, if we could, Dan, before we go.
Can I ask one question for you real quick, Stu, on Massie? Yeah. What do you think is the opportunity, on a local race like this? Do the numbers come in all at once? Like, is there going to be a situation where these, where this market moves as the results are coming in on this?
I think there's a good chance of that. One of the interesting parts about this particular district, Dan, is that it hits, I think it's 4 different media markets. It's one of these weird long districts that breaks up between a bunch of different places. The big Massie district is northern Kentucky, near Cincinnati, basically. It's the Cincinnati-market. If you want to advertise to this market, you're buying advertising in Cincinnati. So it's kind of expensive there. But that area has always been, it's a big Rand Paul stronghold. It's a Thomas Massie stronghold. The other parts of it, which like Louisville and even Charleston, West Virginia, I think is one of them off the top of my head. I can't remember what the fourth one is off the top of my head. But these other markets, they're going to come in. They could come in at different times. There's 2 time zones in the state, so it depends on. I don't remember where the time zone line is honestly in this district. It's 6 o'clock local time is when polls close, but there's two time zones in the state. It goes between Eastern and Central. So I think there is a real chance of that. And one of the things that are happening here is if you see below expectation results coming in from that Cincinnati suburb area, if Massie isn't doing really well there, he has to do really well there to win this thing. It's possible, and it's his best performing area. But if he's under expectations there, and you start seeing those numbers come in on the earlier side, where and they won't be the first in, but they'll be relatively early for that area. You can kind of say, well, there might be movement toward Massie, which even though because he'll probably be leading that area, but it might not be strong enough, and it might move those numbers to make them a little bit more advantageous for you to find value. It might not change your impression of the election overall, but it might get you a better price, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Let me jump over real quick to Spencer Pratt. Let me just start with this ad. Get your take on this ad. Here's Spencer Pratt. He had a controversy where he did an ad initially where he showed his home that was basically a trailer. He's like, now I live here he said, this is my new home because my house burned down, even though all my opponents have beautiful houses. That was kind of the point of it. It was a great ad. So he showed that. Then he got in trouble by, I guess, a local media source who was like, I can't believe he said that. He's not living there. He's actually living in a nice hotel in Bel-Air. Well, he's responded to that now with this ad.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I had to take a minute to run for mayor. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. Los Angeles Palisades, my backyard is where I spent most of my days, feeding hummingbirds, relaxing all cool, avoiding all the bums outside of the school. When a couple politicians who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood, I got in one little fire. My mom got scared and said, you're moving in with Harvey Levin in Bel-Air. About 7 or 8, and I yelled to the rubble, yo ho, smell you later. I moved to my kingdom, I was finally there to sit on my throne as the Prince of Bel-Air.
So, I mean, it's well done. There's no doubt about it. He did a good job with it. I will, I'd love to get your impression on it. To me, he did the whole theme song. Part of me thinks you just do a quick little burst of that and you get the point.
Yeah.
He decided to go for the whole thing. He's doing an incredible job. I'm not sure this is his best ad, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it is. And there's another montage of him as well where they're trying to like pin him on this, a bunch of different reporters and everything. Well, but now there's reports you don't live in this. And he's like, I don't live anywhere. He's like, my house burned down, and it's just like, it's just like the perfect answer to that, because it's kind of like, how do you come back to that? Yeah, like, oh, you and your fibbing, you're not living in your trailer that you're saying you're living in. Like you could possibly expect him to just stay in this at all times.
Well, particularly as you're running for mayor as a celebrity, right? Like, I mean, staying in there, it's probably not the safest environment for someone in that situation.
Right. He's handling those attacks well.
I think he is. He is, by the way, a factor in this race. I mean, you have to run an A+ race to be a factor as a Republican in a situation like this. He's at 28% chance to win on Kalshi. 62% is Karen Bass, and Rahman has really faded to only 12% after that disastrous debate performance. What I kind of find interesting about this, there's a story out today from the New York Post. Trump could shake out the LA mayor race with bombshell Spencer Pratt endorsement. We've been talking a lot about Trump endorsements. They're almost universally positive for someone in a primary situation, especially if you're in a Republican primary. That is not the situation Spencer Pratt is in. In fact, This is an area, Los Angeles, that Trump lost. I think it was 70-28 to Kamala Harris in 2024, and obviously an election he wound up winning and becoming president again. So, does a Trump endorsement help or hurt Spencer Pratt in LA?
I don't really see how it helps in any particular way, because what is the reality on the ground in Los Angeles there where he's running is the anger over the mismanagement of what happened, right? I think that's universally accepted. It's a heavily liberal Democratic area. So I don't think the liberal Democrat Hollywood elite in that area are going to be like, oh, President Trump supported him, so I'm all in now. I just don't see that really doing anything. What is doing something, I think, is the fact that Spencer Pratt seems to be connecting on a human level with a lot of the incompetence that's been happening in Los Angeles. I mean, it's undeniable. I saw a video, Stu, of Los Angeles. I just happened to see it, like from the 1960s. One of these, you see these pop up on the internet every now and then, and it's like, hey, life of Los Angeles in the 1960s. And it's insane. Like, it's, the streets are clean. There's no traffic hardly at all on the highways. It's like, what? I mean, everyone's been to LA. Like, the traffic situation there is nuts. And then somebody else posted underneath that one, hey, here it is today. And there was like a local news report. And it was all homeless people on the streets and, guys, fentanyl overdoses happening on the street, tents, all this stuff. And, Spencer Pratt has been sort of touching on that. So I really think that is a real thing that you can't fake. But it's such a heavily Democratic, liberal area that I don't know. I just don't know that it matters. But it does seem like I kind of, when I look at these markets, Stu, and I see Spencer Pratt at 29, I'm just wondering, do the people in LA just really not care about the misery of people enough? I cannot imagine that Karen Bass has done enough to secure a big, massive victory like this. It just seems like the performance has been so bad, and even the liberal Democrats there accept it as bad. So it's shocking to me that it's sitting at that, but and so I'm wondering if the markets are underpricing the angst.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember at one point my wife was talking to me. She's been following this race, and she said something to me about like how could these people possibly not vote for Spencer Pratt after everything that's happened there? And it
doesn't even matter like who it is. It's just like the person that's in is going to get the blame, and then there's someone else coming along who experienced it. It doesn't matter left or right in a local race as much, I think, but we'll see. And
usually the situation there is you're just picking a third. Like the other Democrat would be the obvious answer here. Like, again, not obvious to me as a conservative, but obvious to the Los Angeles voter. But when I said this, I said, the Spencer Pratt thing is interesting because I think he's done a good job. He's run a really good campaign. But internalize this to yourself. She's a big conservative. What would it have taken? What series of events could you imagine that would, let's say, have you voting for Joe Biden in 2020? Right? Like, these are people who are ideologically committed to leftism. Right? The idea of voting for a Republican is like it's as if you're just gonna throw a bag of kittens out of a plane. It's so horrible that you can't even imagine it, right, to them. And so I mean, look, burning down the city is the type of event that could make this happen, but you got to remember how steep this climb is for them.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that the difference here on that phenomena that you're talking about is in a local race, I do think it's a little bit different because, yes, there are left-right political things and key issues from those that are nationally that sometimes play out locally. But a lot of times locally, it's just, like some of the candidates are saying, can you get the poop off the streets? Right. I don't care if you're a liberal or Democrat. If you're cleaning, I mean, look at Rudy Giuliani in New York, right? Like, so I think we talked about that. But so in a local race like a mayor, I think it seems like it's less of a hurdle to overcome.
It is at least possible, and that's certainly nice. Less of a hurdle to overcome than the poop that they're currently stepping over. Dan Andros, thanks so much at Dan Andros on X. We will be back here in just a second. Welcome back to Predictable with Stu, predictableshow.com. If you go there, drop some comments in the Substack on whatever we're talking about at the time. Would love to feature your comment right here on the show. Of course, you can also drop them at YouTube and a bunch of other places. 52 Movies a Year writes, I bought Ed Gallrein to lose to Massie on Tuesday at 60%. I think Trump can sway voters on the national scale, but Massie is popular in his state. That's true. Registered Republicans voting only helps. If a Democrat or independent registers Republican, they will vote Massie to spite Trump. That part of that dynamic is actually, I think, very true. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Let me give you the other side of this with Dragon Horde GM. He says, as someone in northern Kentucky, I've been building positions around Massie winning for a while. And yes, it's all collapsing in the last couple of weeks. Hasn't been that fun to try to change course last minute. That's always a difficult situation when you build the thesis and you're like, wait a minute, this is crumbling underneath me. Number one, that's really difficult to do. Sometimes it's the right thing to do, and it's a hard thing to read, frankly, because I'm sure of this happening, and then all of a sudden you're trying to reverse what you're up to. That's a difficult thing for anybody to do. The fascinating part about this is a lot of the crumbling over the past couple of weeks has been associated with these allegations. Again, I don't have any evidence on this. I tend to never believe last-minute allegations when it comes to a candidate. But I think, especially when you see some of the people who are responsible for these allegations on social media, you see the level of core focus is going on right now to unseat Thomas Massie. If he survives this, man, the guy's he's a cockroach. He's never going to be killed by any nuclear explosion. That I think, because this is the most serious. He's had other challenges. This is the most serious he's ever faced. I do think he's popular in Northern Kentucky. I do think he has a chance here. I want to be clear. I think he's got probably a 1 in 4 type of chance to win, but I do think he is legitimately the underdog as I feel right now. We will see how this plays out. Again, I kind of root for Thomas. I like that type of guy. The guy who's just going to come out and kind of do what he's saying. He's not going to fold to any political pressure. I like that in a person. I like that in a representative. But this is a big challenge. He's got every political gun pointed at him. I don't know if I should say that anymore, considering the fact that people keep actually shooting at politicians. But you know what I'm saying? The metaphorical guns are being pointed at Thomas Massie right now, trying to take him out. We will know potentially by the end of the evening whether that's going to occur or not. I want to thank you for joining us. Join us on the live stream, predictableshow.com and youtube.com/@predictableshow. We will be talking about the election results as they come in. So join us over there on the live stream as well. And hopefully we'll find some good opportunities together. We'll do that. We try to do that every single week as these elections go forward. We're at Predictable Show on all social media as well. Join us there. And of course, Stu and Dave Do America as well over on Blaze TV. Love that show. Really funny show. Today, you can go check that out on YouTube as well. All right, that's all I have for you tonight. We will see you on the live stream and at predictableshow.com.